Caleb?
Thank you. So can there be any more buildings put on there? The way
The way the Longhorn site was originally proposed to have two things prior to Longhorn, which I guess there could be at some point another plan would come back before you if that was going to be proposed. I don't see that happening as long as Longhorn is operational. They needed a certain amount of parking space, and that's what they were provided with. So it's possible if something changes here and the parking requirements change, there could be another site plan that would come back before that, but there's no plans.
so would splitting these then, if we're looking at parking, would splitting these two impact because now we have parking for the whole big site, and we're gonna peel away some of that. So
the parking stand separate. So the dividing line here divides the parking areas. The parking area for Longhorn is here, and then the rest of the parking for 200 Executive Boulevard is this location. When this years before Longhorn, there was proposal to do multiple buildings on the front site, and there was also a proposal to do some cross parking between the two parcels. But once Longhorn came in, that was not necessary.
right. Yeah, that covers it. Thank you.
You all set? Okay. Any other questions to the applicant? Steve, there's not actually going to be a physical divider on the parking premises, is there?
No, there's actually some cross easements that allow
Okay.
these two properties to use both, because Longhorn does utilize this curb cut at this location. So there's an easement that lets, they're going to use this. And then there's another curb cut over here. And Longhorn also has access to get in and do some maintenance over in this location. So there are cross easements through the property.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else, Steve, before we open up to the public? All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Get this out of here.
At this time, are there any members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this application?
All right, should I put that back up?
Well, let's see what we got. Thanks, so. See none, any members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Just make sure you come up and identify your name and address, please.
Richard Cooper, 79 Lane. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but the gentleman said that the owner was doing this mostly for financial reasons. If you were to approve this, does that change this is more of a question really, which would determine how I feel. Would this lower the amount of taxes they're paying to the town? Or does that change the property value for each?
I think it would ultimately be a negligible.
Well, I'm just wondering, I heard it was for financial reasons, so I just wanted to ask that question.
I think that, and Steve, you can clarify, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that what he meant was that he didn't want to have the burden of running the one property and wanted to keep the other property, the financial burden of the cost of running that other property. The Longhorn Steakhorn property is the one he's trying to dispose of, if you will. Correct?
Okay. I mean, I'm more than happy if the gentleman wants to elaborate on that. That would be my only concern. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. Steve.
Financial may be the wrong word. It's more about how they finance the buildings. They have mortgages on separate buildings, and it's easier if they're on separate parcels. So, to be honest with you, I think the value would probably increase when subdivided. So I don't think it would reduce taxes. I think, if anything, it would increase taxes. Thank you.
Is there any member who'd like to speak on this application? Seeing none, is there any this public hearing open? Anyone? Mary Ellen, we all set? All right, we'll close the public hearing on that without objection and move on to item 8B, public hearing to consider opting out of accessory dwelling unit ADU requirements and parking limitations outlined in Public Act 2129. This is a public hearing that we're required to hold in order to opt out of these requirements. And the process is outlined in the Public Act. So is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on the proposal to opt out of either of these two options? Okay.
For the record, Steve Judas at 876 South Main Street. I was just curious as to what we're opting out of, that's all.
Okay. Mary Ellen, you want to give us an overview on the Public Act? I mean, there is a memo that you provided to all members of the commission up on the website, but maybe you can just sort of highlight that memo for us.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, there has been recent legislation that was passed that actually has several components to it. One of which is the requirement for municipalities to designate locations or districts where accessory apartments are allowed. At least one accessory apartment shall be allowed as of right on each lot that contains a single family dwelling. Is the accessory dwelling part of it. And then there's a parking limitation that municipalities cannot require more than one parking space for a studio or one bedroom, or more than two parking spaces for a dwelling unit with two or more bedrooms, unless the town opts out to either provision, or you have to opt out.
You all set?
Can I just add?
Sure.
So the other thing here is and I think, Mary Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, today, if you have an accessory apartment, it goes through special permit. And we have a public hearing, and you have to have public notification and the like. So if you're putting a apartment on your house for, mom's gonna come live with us, that kind of a thing. You alert your neighbors, you come, and usually you have a public hearing, let people know, and you come to one meeting, two tops, and have a nice day. Tomorrow, there's no special permit, no public hearing. And the other thing is, we require it to be attached to the home. And this says it doesn't have to necessarily be attached to home. It could be another piece of property, another building on that property. So it's not just attached to home, it could be detached as well. So that's part of it as well. And there is the square footage. We say 800, give or take. You come here and you get I want to do 900, like, okay. And this says, 1,000, if you will. So those are some of the differences. I think the big one is for me, and we'll talk about it when we get to it, is no public hearing. And, we also require that if you're building a accessory apartment, whatever you call it, that you sign an affidavit to say, it's not going to be a business. It's for my, mom or whatever. And this says you don't do that anymore. So we can't ask that question. And because it is a no special permit, there's no public hearing and would just be part of a regular subdivision, or just, a building permit, if you will. So for developers and the like. So those are some, I think, big differences between what we do versus what this is trying to do, I think. But we could talk about that. I mean, if I said anything wrong, but Mary Ellen, correct me. That's when I read it. That's how I interpret
No,
it.
that's
Should turn-
correct. I mean,
Thank you.
another one that you didn't mention is that the Southington parent-grandparent regulation currently restricts it to family.
Oh, yeah.
And the new legislation, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a relative to live in the accessory apartment. But basically, what you hit are the bullet points that are outlined in the
Yep.
Public Act.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who, just one second, would like to speak on this proposal?
Sev Bovino, 285 at Hightower Road. I have a question. So the proposal is to not participate in that, is to opt out, which means you're not going to allow those apartments?
Right.
Okay.
That's the proposal.
Okay.
Or because you have to say, do I opt out, or you're just in type thing. That's what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mary Ellen, if I may.
Sure.
If we were to, let's say hypothetically opt in, would we be able to then regulate within our regulations as to how far we would like to opt in? Like, can we say accessory dwelling units only for in-law apartments and family? Or would we just be opted in?
My understanding is that if you don't either opt out or change your regulations to meet the spirit of this, I believe you have to go by the guidelines that it allows.
Right.
Understandable. Thank you for that.
Right. Because I had the same thing. Like, can you, like, I should choose my words incorrectly. Can you line item it? Like, this is okay, but not this or whatever. And no, but when we get to Bisbee, because like, there's something in here that I kind of think we could do regulation wise, but there's a lot of stuff that I don't. So
I always appreciate
could-
that you see that perspective, Peter.
we
I
could,
like that.
so we could say, well, this may be okay, but this not so much, and why. So we could see what the deal is on it.
Thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr.
You're
Cooper,
welcome.
you still have to
Richard.
give us your name and address. Sorry.
Richard Cooper, 79 Barbara Lane again. Just thank you, Peter, for articulating those thoughts. It is helpful when you do that, so thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner.
Call me what you like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I guess I would just, because, I hear a lot of different things about what this is, and it does not seem black and white. It does seem like it could have some issues, a little too much apps, maybe a little too much from the state telling us what to do, maybe. I guess I would just like to ask if any of you would like to share, because it's, maybe I'm assuming here, but it does seem like this commission, Planning and Zoning Commission wants to opt out. So maybe if any of you would like to share, what your biggest concern is about this, I would appreciate that.
Well, I think that's up to commission members individually, so if they.
Right.
And,
Just if
and
anyone would like to
understand that
elaborate.
procedurally, Richard, what we do is we're going to have a business section where this will be discussed amongst us before we decide to take action, if we decide to take action.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm sorry for assuming, but
No, that's okay.
I just, like I said, I'm not even sure how I feel, to be honest, but I guess my biggest concern would be limiting access to our town to people who are coming here, and seeking a better life for themselves, right? People who, maybe immigrants from another country who want to come here and live with their family that's already established. I don't know. I don't want to, I want to be careful about limiting opportunities for people with affordable housing. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that we devote enough to it. But that's just my opinion. So I would like to, I hope you all will consider, the opportunities that staying in this could provide. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other member of the public who'd like to speak on these two proposals?
Good evening. Pete Anderson, 1177 Marion Avenue in Marion. I share exactly the concerns that the previous speaker made. My wife and I were discussing this tonight. I think we came down on two different sides. So I'm most curious, why is it that the town wants to opt out? What are the reasons for opting out? And they may be convincing reasons. Haven't really made up my mind firmly yet. So I would like to hear that. And I guess that's basically it. I'd like to hear the reasons. And if you decide to opt out, at the same time, can you change our regulations to opt in to those features that may be beneficial to the community? Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate your input. Any other member of the public who'd like to provide input on this proposal? Any questions from members of the commission? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on this. Moving on to item 8C, Wesley Code, special permit application to construct a garage which is in excess of 3 spaces, property located at 131, AKA 137 Mount Vernon Road in an R20-25 zone, SPU 651. My understanding, Mary Ellen, is this is not ready to go?
Correct.
So we're looking for a table on this?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we table SPU 651.
We have a motion for Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
That's a question, Mr. Chair.
Second from, do you have a question or?
Yes, just a
Okay,
question.
let's just wait. Let's just get a second. Can we get a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Bowles with a second. Before we vote, what's your question?
So for this application, it's been with us for a while. How long can it
He
stay?
has until the next meeting or else it has to be withdrawn or denied. My understanding, by the way, for my engineering friends out there, is that he's looking for a wetlands delineation. So anyone who has the capability to do that should maybe reach out to him and do that for him. He's having trouble finding someone. So, but anyways, you all set?
That'll do it.
Everyone all set?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Reason. Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Moving into the business meeting, number 9 on the agenda, item 9A, Diversified United or Unlimited LLC, 2-lot re-subdivision application located at 200 Executive Boulevard, owned by Executive 200 LLC in an I-1 zone, S13229. Do we have a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve S1329.
We have a motion from Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Santago with a second. Is there any discussion?
Ask one more question. But I think I might have had my chance with the public
Caleb,
comment.
I am all about input from a variety of people, as diverse as it can be. So sure, go ahead and ask the question.
Being, and again, I think I should have asked this, and as soon as we closed the public comment, I thought of the question. Utilities back and forth between those spaces, I guess this is more for the applicant, but is that impacted by separating out this property line?
I'm going to assume that the utilities are separate to each building, and therefore it would have no effect on that. I'm seeing an affirmative shake of the head from Steve Judas out in the audience, so it's correct. Or my assumption seems to be correct, I guess.
We're guessing, yes.
Yes.
I'll go with that guess.
Okay. Is there any further discussion for members of the commission? None, Mary, call, please.
Commissioner Rourke?
Yeah.
Commissioner Volpe?
Yes.
Commissioner Wodowski?
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Coles?
Yes.
Commissioner Santago?
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka?
Yes.
Chair Hammersley?
Hammers is a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Congratulations. Good job. Item 9B, this is to consider opting out of the accessory dwelling unit ADU requirements outlined in Public Act 21-29. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure. Commissioner Volpe with a question.
Thank you. I
Fire away.
appreciate that you take such diverse comments from us.
Yeah.
So I see a number 1 and a number 2 next to B.
Yep.
And this might be silly, but just wondering, can we opt into one and opt out of the other? Why are there two items listed?
So the action isn't per the Public Act.
Sure.
It takes effect at a certain point.
Yes.
In order for it to take effect, we have the option as a municipality, any municipality in Connecticut, any of the 168 other municipalities.
169.
No.
Well, we're 169.
Yeah,
but
all of us. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Have
get
the
that.
option, have the option to opt out requirements that are on ADUs and parking. They're two separate requirements. So the reason that this item is divided up into two separate pieces is because we have to take a vote on both pieces. So it's not an opt-in. Opt-in is not an option. We either opt out or it becomes something that we have to
Law of the
follow.
land.
May I rephrase my question?
Sure.
So, is it 1 or 2, or do we have to say both? Like, that's really like just my basic, what I'm
votes
saying
versus
here.
one.
Well,
Is it 2 votes for item B on our agenda? Or is it 1 vote?
it's going to
It's
be,
2 votes.
it's going to be 2 votes,
That was
one
my
on the ADU, one on the parking requirement.
Okay, thank you.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from members of the commission? Any discussion from members of the commission? Or can we get a motion, I
Oh,
guess?
good discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to have a
Well,
discussion.
well, let's get a motion, right?
I think I need to have a discussion before I can have a motion.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Volpe.
I guess I'm just a little concerned with hearing some of the people's concerns over these is that we really don't have this type of diversified housing in our town. The fact that we do currently have a regulation that supports in-law family housing seems that there are some things from this that maybe we should consider in the future. I agree that overall it's a little multifaceted in my opinion. The language a little convoluted, and as a historian, I love reading, but this is a long piece. And so there's just some things about it, though, that I think we should consider, especially because in the dense areas of our town where there aren't just single-family homes, where we do have multifamily units, this may be something beneficial not only to a landlord who's mortgaging a property and wants to get extra rental, to people within my age group who can't afford a single family house in town but would like to try to still maintain in this community. I think there are things to consider with the accessory dwelling unit as long as we're responsible within our regulations as to why we should have it and diversify our housing stock here in town, because truly we don't have anything that would allow something like this to be affordable and give a property owner more leeway creatively with their property. So I guess that's kind of what I want to talk about with my fellow commissioners, and some of the memos that we did get. Whatever way we go tonight, I think we've learned something to take away from it. And whether it's the body that sits or the body to be, there are things that we should consider here, because we don't have enough of it. It's clear. We don't meet it. We don't have enough of it. So that was my discussion.
Okay,
I feel better. Thank you.
okay, thanks.
I appreciate
So
it.
why don't we we can work this way if you want. Caleb, you want to
sure.
go next?
Sure. So I mean, in looking at it, and there's a lot, and I think there's a lot less as much as we can describe it and read it in the summaries that we were provided, but I think it's a lot to wrap our heads around and make a decision quickly. There are things in this that I really do like, and there are things in here that I am really anxious about. I'm anxious about the potential to double the single family occupancy throughout the entire jurisdiction. And that's that raises a flag. However, there are pieces of this that, in the proper location, I think that some of these could be easily handled by staff. And so, the opt-in, opt-out thing is very final. And I hate to lose the good stuff, and, balance those two out. So I'm still trying to build it in my head. And I'm really, if you could circle back to me, maybe after everybody else gets a chance to, and I'd like to hear from my colleagues as to where we're going.
Okay, let's go to my right. Teresa, you want to?
I gave it some thought. And I think of a lot of things when I've read the memo specifically. I didn't read the legislative act in full. I see some things as a negative as far as maybe a population increase. Maybe we can't handle services if every single, I'm just saying, for example, if every single homeowner decides they want to add a building, then you have impervious cover increasing, you have water quality being affected, you potentially could have wetlands, buffers, and inland wetland areas impacted as well. So I look at it from a natural, we have open space that we're trying, this town's really big on open space. We have open space that we want to keep, and we have a lot of residential areas that have nice open spaces connected to them, So I just look at this as something that is going to be more damaging to the environment from my perspective, and a little bit of a more impact to our services. And at this point, I'm like, I agree that maybe we should, opt out at this point. And if there's a way that, I don't know if there's a way that you can opt in later on down the line. I mean, is there an option for that? Or I don't know anything about the legislative. So that's my perspective and my opinion on this.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Jeff?
My biggest sticking point is when we have applicants come before us and want to build a oversized garage or a structure in their backyard. One of our biggest, as a board, our sticking points is, does it fit in character or harmony with the neighborhood? And if we start seeing all these dwelling units go up, then and we have no say in what they look like or potentially how large it is, I think we're just going to lose the character and the harmony of our town.
Oh, love that.
Okay,
Great point.
thanks, Jeff. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, to further with what Jeff said, I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a separate unit. I mean, if somebody wanted to renovate their garage and put a family in their garage and rent it out, I think that half of what gets discussed here, and maybe not half, but, and at ZBA is garage usage. And if we're putting families in there, the town is going to lose control over what's happening in terms of schools. We can't predict what's going to happen if somebody finishes off their garage and decides to put a family in there. I think Southington is, I think the town is being run very well, and I'm not sure we need, Hartford necessarily telling us what and where we need to do in the town.
Peter?
Thank you. So the issues that I have with this versus where the type of municipality where I think it would be better. So I'm really not in favor of something that takes away public notification or public discussion. As we know, the only way we get a public forum is for a special permit. If it's a straight subdivision application, there's no public hearing. And so taking that away, I'm usually not in favor of things where I'm taking away from hearing from the public. And as you know, whenever we get this sort of application or something like this, we say, did you talk to your neighbor? Because maybe we get those things like, well, could you put up a hedge in between or that kind of a deal? That goes away with this. So I'm not in favor of that. Just in general of stifling public opinion. That's a main one for me. The other is this detached allowed. So right now, you have to have it attached to your house, and I echo Mr. Gwork's comments about character and all that kind of thing. But think of the ramification of a detached unit. Now I have my main home, and if I have enough space, I could put up another 1,000 to 1,200 foot structure that I rent out. This ADU is for rentals, not ownership. So now I've just doubled the density of that neighborhood, wherever it is, and we get no public forum, no public notification, nothing. So if I go to an extreme position of a subdivision, now all of a sudden, I put single family homes, think of an R80 zone. I put a big 3,500, 4,000 square foot home, and right next to it, I put a 1,200 square foot rental home. R80 zone, R40 zone. I've just doubled my density and we have no say because it's a subdivision. Also, as it says in here, because we all talk about affordable housing, which is true. And as we know, sale price is only one aspect of affordable housing. It's whether or not, that's only one aspect of it. It's, do you have, government involvement and all that? As it says here, this, if we do this, will not increase the municipality's housing stock calculation. So we get no benefit for affordable housing calculation in this, even though the government says you can't. So this has nothing to do with the affordable housing calculation that we're having those folks do the study on for us. So the detached thing has me very concerned. Where I think we may have room within our own regulations, however, when I read this, was relatives only. And one of the things that the regulation subcommittee we were looking at that's kind of related to this that we were targeting in our definitions was the definition of what a family is. And I think the definition of what a family is a bit outdated in comparison to what people consider a family today. And so today it's, relative only, but if two lifelong friends wanted to suddenly live together to share expenses and you wanted to add an addition to the house and have separate things, we were really going to say no to that? So I think we have room for relatives only within our own definition. And I think we could have a discussion about max size for attached unit. So I think those sort of things we may want to do, particularly if I'm in an R80 zone, how big, R25 zone, how big. But I think we can handle that within ourselves and still be subject to a public hearing. It's like, to use Jeff's comment, if I'm in an R80 zone and I want to attach something, why wouldn't you tell your neighbors that? So that's not something I like. And I think, too, for the town's benefit, from a legal and litigation standpoint, I would still want to have that affidavit to say, I'm not running a business. So can you imagine we're allowing a detached structure, nobody gets to sign anything that I'm not running a business, and somebody with ill intent starts running a business out of there, and I got no parking requirement. You can have as many cars as you want. So I think the unintended consequences we have to be very mindful of. Now, if we were in a community that was heavily rural, I got big expanses, pieces of land, and you're trying to attract people into it. This may be something you want to do because I have a house, maybe I got big plot of land, I could rent it out, I get some rental structures, we're trying to attract people to an area, that kind of thing. That's not our problem in Southington. We have the opposite problem. So I think for a big rural community with big expanses, plots of land where you don't mind separate structures, maybe this is something for you, but I don't think it's for us for all those reasons that we talked about. Because when you think of it, why have R80, R40 zones anymore? When I could have a couple structures there and I just increase my density with the stroke of a pen and we have no say over it. So for those, and I've talked too much, I apologize for hogging the mic, but I read this thing and I think for what it says and some of the unintended consequences, I'm not for it, but I think we could have reasonable discussions about some of it within our own regs.
Oh, sir?
I talked it up, I'm sorry.
Good. You did a great job, Peter. Thank you. Mr. Solko.
I would just like to reiterate what Peter said and what the other commissioners have said. Basically, it's taking our regulations out of our hands and putting it in the hands of a homeowner that does not have to come before this board. We have no say, no regulations, no way to opt in or opt out of that particular application. It's just like Big Brother's coming down and telling you how you're going to run your town. We have 169 towns in Connecticut. Every one of them is different. Hartford is certainly different than Southington. And I think to Peter's point about the density of a piece of property, why have an R80, R40, R20, and 25? It goes away when, in fact, you can put a large structure on the property, and then someone comes in and says, I'm going to put up a 1,200-foot detached building, and we have no control. We have no public input. That's one thing that I think that we have prided ourselves on, is taking public input, listening to what our constituents and what the town people have to say, then we make a decision. Also, it seems to me that we've undertaken a study of looking at affordable housing in town. We don't have the final results of it. And to say that we're going to end up changing our regulations without having that full study at this point, I think does a disservice, to those that are doing the study. And I don't really see where this has anything to do with diversity at all. It just doesn't do anything in Southington of what it's going to do for diversity. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So let me bring up the rear here a little bit. I agree with a lot of the things that were said tonight. I don't think that there's any part of this, and I have read the 20-page, 17-page bill, the entire bill, of which the ADU portion is only but maybe 3 or 4 pages. It's not very lengthy. It's accompanied, and Mary Ellen provided this to us a while ago with an analysis done by the Office of Legislative Research, OLR, which looks at each of the sections and lays out what the consequences of each of those sections are. I have done that, and I don't think that there's any part of this requirement on ADUs that benefits this town. This town is a town that, as I think we pride ourselves on providing a diversity of housing options and opportunities. And I've walked the streets, as most of us have, and I know what's out there. And we don't get credit for a lot of units in our town as affordable under the statute 830G, simply because they don't hit every single piece of what is required. For example, every affordable housing unit must have a 40-year covenant that accompanies it, which goes to the long-term locking that unit up as an affordable unit. And we don't have that. But there are plenty of properties around town where the monthly rent on units is far less what the monthly rent would be or is required to be under affordable housing under the state statute and formula. We learned that. We talked about that at length under two different applications, one on Liberty Street and one recently on Landing Street, that the monthly rent in order to qualify for affordable housing is pretty high. And I'll give you a firsthand experience. I have a 25-year-old daughter who was looking for a house, and she looked in Southington, and there were plenty of housing options that were available in terms of the rental for a 25-year-old college student that she could have afforded. But because housing and eviction things were going on or not going on, the availability of those units just wasn't there. I think too that this piece of legislation, which is, I think it was someone who's either Jeff or Steve and maybe Peter said this. This comes down from Hartford, and it purports to provide a one-size-fits-all with regards to zoning regulations, and I don't think that that's the case. We are 169 towns that are diverse. We are each diverse historically. We were founded for diversity and to create our own diversity and our own character. And, so the laws that are good for one town aren't necessarily good for another, and nor should they be necessarily. We should be able to govern as close as we can to home, which is right here. It removes the what they refer to as an onerous special permit public hearing. And I don't know what is onerous about a public hearing. We have sat through public hearings on this commission that have lasted us until midnight over the past 6 months. We all remember those, right? Did anyone walk out of here and say that those were onerous or that members of the public shouldn't be allowed or shouldn't be given the opportunity to provide input into our decision making? Because I, for one, I think that I'm in the majority amongst the people that are sitting up here and that sat through those, that I think that by giving us their input, we reach a better decision. And I think that regardless of whether it's an SPU, a special permit, or it's an ADU on an accessory dwelling unit or on some other matter, I think we all benefit from having the public input. And I think that to remove this, which is what this legislation would do, that is a slap in the face of democracy. And that is a slap in the face to the people out there who have given us all the input over the last couple of years, and to any of us who have sat through those very long meetings, maybe too long from time to time, but they were good meetings where we had great dialogue going back and forth, and hopefully we'll continue that dialogue moving forward. I too would point out that our regulations can be changed at any time. We have a reg review commission, subcommittee. It's headed by Peter Santago. We started that subcommittee 2 years ago when I became chairman. And that subcommittee's purpose is to continually and on an ongoing basis look at our regs or regulations and to provide input on where those might need to be modified. And we have modified some of those over the course of time, and I'm sure we'll continue to modify those moving forward. But to say that we should do this because it provides, or there's options here that are potentially have some benefit. Well, we can incorporate those options anytime that we want. If we were to allow this to become the law with Southington, forget it. You can't do that. You're done. That's it. If we don't opt out, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at taking our regulations and find me a circular file because that's where they can go. Any other comments from members of the commission?
I got one.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I value your impassioned speech. I think that the biggest takeaway, and neither myself, and I can't speak for Mr. Coles here, but I think what we were saying was just that there are things about this that we should consider. I would like to point to the diversity of housing. I mean, Southington is predominantly white with a socioeconomic class that can afford to live in the units that are available. I think what this says to us is that there is an ability to maybe give another generation a space to afford something here. Maybe it doesn't have to look like what we have right now, but we surely do a very good job of putting age-restricted cluster housing in and dense development that does have affordable housing components. So I don't think that adding something to our regulations based off of what this is trying to do, but like you said, catered to what our community needs. Our community needs more diverse housing. And not diverse in the sense of a race or a gender, diverse in the sense of affordability to make our community a fuller place, a better place. I mean, I think that there's something to take away from this and that. And I, again, would hope that whether it's the body that is or the body that be with the regulation committee, when we're looking at affordable housing, like Mr. Selka said, Commissioner Selka said, this is something to consider. I'm not saying go full speed ahead, baby, on this one. I'm saying we need to consider what it's saying to us and take it seriously going forward so that we have more diverse.
No, I would just, I'm sorry. I
Not
don't know
to
if you
hammer
can-
it into the
No,
ground, pun
no,
intended,
no.
but
Yeah, that's okay.
I think it's okay to have and we weren't saying go full steam ahead on this. It
You know
needs
what-
to be catered to
right. You
Southern
know what we
Lit.
could do though with that, and I don't disagree with you, is when we get our study back,
Yes,
we can accomplish that
For sure.
and get our calculation up. With this, we don't get our calculation up.
no.
So you hate to say what's in it for us, but I think once we get our study back, I think we're all looking forward to that because I think we all agree conceptually we should do something with that.
Yeah.
Then we could do it on our terms for our benefit to fit that versus, as the chairman says, this one size fits all thing where it's like, no, and we'll get to have our own say in it. I don't disagree with that.
And while we may not want to be regulated by Hartford, as you say, we can still take the information that was obviously well thought out, put together, and put before us in a way that could help us make our community better going forward. Because why are we all here if not for that? If we're not here to look to the future of development in our town, and we're just focusing on we don't want to be told what to do, we should take this information and go forward with it in a way that's responsible. Like I've said with anything.
Well, I think that I know for the last 2 years, I've worked with staff to try to get an affordable housing study done. And I'm happy that we finally did that with the help of the council and this group, that we kicked that off 2 weeks ago. And I think that Bob Solka brings up a good point, that it's a little premature to try to decide what we have and what we may need to do in terms of diversity of housing. Let's let that flesh itself out. Let's receive that when it comes back to us at some point next year. And then we can look at it and hopefully get a plan to provide a more diverse housing set of opportunities. I do think that we do have a pretty diverse set of housing opportunities in our town, however. We have the big, 2,500, 5,000 square foot houses. Yeah, we have that. But my house is 1,500 square feet, and I live 2 houses away from multifamily housing, whether you go up the street or down the street.
Well, like you said, we got to see the study.
Well, we have multifamily housing, we have rental units, we have, grandparent apartments, we have affordable housing. We may not meet the goal of what the state set for all the towns. However, I suggest, as I said, that we don't get credit for a lot of the housing that we have because it doesn't meet every single piece of criteria. For one, a 40-year covenants on that unit, for example, but there are houses around town or units around town, rental units around town that are far less than what the state formula sets it at in order to be considered affordable. So, Caleb.
So with that in mind, as you were going through that, could we request that and I apologize for my absence last week because it kind of goes to what I may have missed, but could we add some of the pieces that we like out of this into that report?
No. We're letting the professionals do the report. They're doing a study. We're not going to interfere with the professionals in doing the job that they're hired to do and being paid by the town of Southington to do. I'm not interested in influencing that. I think they influence it. It diminishes what we end up getting at the end. I think you get it back. And as I've said for at least 2 years, every commissioner has an option to provide for a modification or a text amendment that they would like to have. And we've done that. I've done that a couple times, I think, and others have done that as well. So if there's some piece of our regs that you would like to modify, as a commissioner, you have the opportunity to go ahead and propose that.
No, it would have been fine, but
Yeah. I do appreciate constructive conversation, though, especially on something as important as this.
Yeah. Point of order, though, Mr. Chair. So I guess it's for Mary Ellen. in regards, because it's in regard to motion. So it is my understanding regarding an opt-out that we must state the reasons for it, because this then gets referred to the town council. So must the motion include the reasons for opt-out, or can we say opt-out and then have a discussion on reasons? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I'm still confused over 1 and 2.
Well, I think you've stated a lot of the reasons on the record already. Your motion essentially would be to opt out and to refer it to the town council for the same.
So we don't have to have a list of some of the reasons, because like I said, there's some things here that would maybe not okay within this form, but I don't think are reasons for rejection, if you will. But then there's some things which very much are reasons for rejection. I guess that's my point, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think you've stated it on the record. If if anybody wants to summarize,
All right.
you're welcome to, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be part of the actual motion.
Fair enough.
It needs to be
I would
talked
agree with
about in-
Mary Ellen that, we've had really an open discussion, and I think we've covered all of the, I think, critical points that we would like to include in the motion. And, I just think that the only thing we probably haven't answered is the parking limitation piece. And
We're not on that one yet, though, Bob. so
we're still talking on one. I'm sorry. Okay.
We'll get to that one next.
I don't want to jump ahead then.
That's 1 versus 2.
Yeah, okay. But I think we've covered it, and as part of the motion, just include the minutes of the discussion we've had, because I think it covers pretty much everything.
Okay.
And I will say, because you're right, Christina, I am passionate about this. You are correct. And I'm passionate about this because this goes to the heart of what Planning and Zoning Commission does in the town of Southington. This single piece of legislation tries to alter how we operate things here. And I think we do a pretty good job and have done a pretty good job for several decades in our town of running things effectively and to the best that we can. And you are right too, that everybody here has the best interest of the 43,263 residents of the town of Southington in mind whenever they make a decision, whether they're on a majority or the minority part of the vote at the end of the day. But we all have that in the heart. So yeah, I am passionate. I do admit that, and maybe it's to a fault, but it's something I feel very strongly about, and I want to make sure that we do the right thing in my mind anyway. So can we get a motion on this? Before we do that, because sorry, Teresa, because she's only a alternate, isn't allowed to speak after we get a motion. So I'll give Teresa one more opportunity if she has anything else she wants to add before we get a
No,
motion.
thank you, Chairman. I agree with most of what everybody said, all the commissioners, and everything was very thoughtful and poignant, and it is, and I can see the passion in everybody that spoke too, and everything has to be realized that it matters, so whatever everybody said matters, and we're speaking on behalf of the town. I think it's obvious that everybody is speaking because they care about what they do here in this role and what they're doing and helping people in our town. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. With that, can we get a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we opt out of the accessory dwelling unit Public Act 2129.
The requirements outlined?
The requirements as outlined, yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Santago. Is there any further discussion?
Just a quick question. A yes vote means we are opting out.
Correct.
Never know.
No, thank you for
Glad you
asking that.
clarified that.
Thank you for asking that.
The Public Act does require a 2/3 majority in order for this to be transferred over to the town council. So that would mean in our case, because we have 7 members, we would need at least 5 in the affirmative. So with that, Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gork,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
No.
Commissioner Wilowski,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Passionate, yes. Motion passes 6-1. And Mary Ellen, can you move that over to the town council for their consideration ASAP, please? With that, we'll move on to item 9B2, This is to consider opting out of the parking limitations outlined in Public Act 2129. Mary Ellen, you want to give us well, I think you already provided us with an outline of what those requirements are, but want to open it up for discussion amongst the commissioners.
Yeah, so, the parking one, essentially states that, the zoning regulations shall not require more than, trying to find the exact words. Municipalities cannot require more than one parking space for a studio or one bedroom or more than two parking spaces for a dwelling unit with two or more bedrooms unless the town follows the opt-out procedure. And I think in the memo that I sent all of you guys, I gave you the parking requirements that Southington has now for comparison in that table.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Discussion amongst commission members. Peter?
I think we're in only one instance do we require more than two, and it's when you add on to your house and add more people there. So I don't see a big deal with that. So I like our requirements versus them saying you can't have more than whatever. So I think our requirements were pretty thoughtful and specific. And so like, what's the big deal? So I kind of like ours. And like, if you're adding on to your house and having people there, wouldn't you want them to have parking spaces versus parking on the street? So why would I want the potential to have more cars on the street versus if you're adding on, add spots on your property versus add to congestion on the street? So I think our regs and our requirements are pretty specific, and we're there with safety and people in mind. And so I think we should keep ours and not have what they say, just oversimplification of reason.
Thank you, Peter. And Caleb?
Yeah, I agree that it seems that what we have is more strict in requiring more parking on the property. And it seems, again, best for congestion if, typically you do the thing that's more. And the proposed legislation from the state says it's less. I'm not wild about that.
Okay. Thanks, Caleb. Any other discussion from members of the commission?
Are we reading that wrong? Two previous commissioners? Because it says we may not prohibit requiring more than one
Should
parking
not
space
require.
for each studio or one bedroom apartment. And so that's additional parking. So we can't say you need two to have an accessory dwelling, two more parking spaces on top of what you already have. It says we cannot ask for that. It has to be one. So that's the way I'm looking at it. Am I incorrect in that?
You cannot ask for more.
Correct.
Right.
For each, the house, the single family house already has the parking spaces. We cannot ask for more than one additional one for each accessory dwelling unit.
Mm-hmm.
Or did I not understand both commissioners who spoke before me?
So am I? And I'm looking at the comparison that was given to us. So it looks like each studio or one bedroom dwelling unit or more than two parking spaces for each dwelling unit with more than two bedrooms, which required, so a studio requires two for the state one.
Yep.
And then if, again, I'm reading it right, if a one bedroom is 1 3/4 parking space.
But it would be one more than what's already on the property, I would assume.
So by the state require, Peter's looking at me.
Okay.
So
That's the way I'm looking at it, because that doesn't make sense the way you guys were interpreting it. To me, it makes more sense saying, because it specifically states, like you said, each studio or one bedroom unit or the two bedrooms, two or more.
No, so I looking at it again.
Yeah.
A studio requires one. A one bedroom, which I would consider a studio, requires 1 3/4 for under our regulation.
Yes, but you have to have the accessory structure on your property after the fact. So you already have parking for your own dwelling, the main dwelling, and then so we can now require more than one more additional one. So say 3 parking spaces. I don't know. Now I'm confused.
I think we lose control over the amount of parking spaces.
Yeah, that's my, I was just trying to clarify, making
Really,
sure
That's how I'm reading
I was
it.
on the same page as everybody else.
Yeah, that's my
That's my
sense too, is that I think that by opting out, we maintain control
Correct, yes.
on a local level, and
Right.
that's
That was
personally for me would be my preference.
That's where I am too. I was
too.
just making sure.
I agree. When I reviewed our regulations, I felt, as Caleb said, that we already had a strict policy in place that
Agreed.
I felt this didn't apply to. So not as much discussion, but hey, look at that,
It's still input. It's all good.
right? Impassionedly.
Any other discussion from members of the commission?
No.
Teresa, you want to say anything before we?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Can we get a motion on this then, please?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we opt out of the parking limitations as outlined in Public Act 2129.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Pulaski with a second. Any further discussion? Mary Ellen, do you have what you need in terms of reasons?
I think so.
You good?
I was having trouble following exactly what you guys were saying, but
Me as well.
Quick math.
can I just confirm something? Am I allowed to do that? I know you have a motion.
Yeah,
I just want to make
Staff
sure
can talk.
everybody understands what this is saying. So essentially what it's saying is you cannot require more than one parking space. If you have a studio, you cannot require more than one parking space. Or if you have a one bedroom, you cannot require more than one parking space. If you have 2 or more bedrooms, you can't require more than 2 parking spaces. So I just want to make sure everybody understands what this is
Okay.
actually saying. If that's what you guys were saying, then we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure. Because the town of Southington's regulations are stricter than these in respects to what you
well,
allow
I
for
think
parking.
by opting out, we still have the flexibility to change our regulations as we see fit, as opposed to if we were subject to these provisions, that flexibility is at best limited. Would that be a fair statement?
So, and I think as part of the regulation review committee, I mean, if
Yeah.
this is something that, the town wants to look at and for various reasons, we could certainly look at it as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. I think Mary Ellen has her reasons. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gore,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilowski,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santego,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley is a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Mary Ellen, also this needs to go to the town council as well. Moving on to item 9C, this was a table, so we'll move on to item 7D. Floodplain, yep, yes. Yes, that was a table. He's waiting on the wetlands delineation on that.
Oh,
Item 9D, floodplain application of NES Group for construction of a 2,000 square foot ion bank with a drive-up ATM and 2,000 square foot retail building with associated site improvements, property located at 376 North Main Street, owned by Sean Daigle in a B zone FF 270. This was tabled from October 5th.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jeff Board. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Bowler Engineering, located at 65 LaSalle Road in West Hartford, Connecticut. Here on behalf of NES Group and Ion Bank for a project located at 376 North Main Street. Here with me this evening is Tom Chiodina with DRL Architects to speak once I get through some of the site and drainage and some of the floodplain issues. Oh, no worries. So if you're not familiar with the property, what you have on the screen here is just an existing conditions plan. I'll wait till he dims the lights a bit here. But it's a former restaurant from, I believe it was Ronaldo's, I want to say, and they've had some, it's since been, so it's been vacated. You guys are aware.
R.I.P.
So it's an interesting site in the sense that there are several design challenges associated with the property, and the fact that it's been vacated for as long as it has also serves well to the proposed development. And it's not often we get to do redevelopments where we're improving a lot of the I guess, water quality and reducing impervious and some of the benefits I'll get into. But one of the biggest challenges in developing this site into anything is with regards to the floodplain. So what you're seeing on this plan right here, and I'll just highlight it with the hand, there's an actual floodway. It's a FEMA floodway that goes through the back here, ultimately through the building here, and that's just based on old, I think, 1970s FEMA mapping. The area is prone to flooding. In all reality, that floodway line actually, comes right to the edge of where that parking is and through the back of this parking lot, because you technically can't have a floodway through a building like that. So once you go through that process with FEMA, you end up amending that floodway. So you're not able to develop in the floodway whatsoever. This plan here, you could see that part of the asphalt, and you even see cars parked in this area here, are within that floodway. So part of what I'm going to get into in a bit is how we're improving upon that. And also, currently there's a 100-year flood elevation as well that's difficult to see, that kind of traverses the entire site. It goes around the building footprint and out in the front. So basically that's the 100-year FEMA flood elevation. And whenever you do development within a 100-year flood elevation, in theory, when you're filling that elevation, you're displacing the floodwaters. So what we look to do in the design plans is provide a one-to-one compensatory storage. In this case, we were able to provide a bit more than what is currently on site to help alleviate some of the flooding. But north is to the right of the page, west to the top. It's right on North Main Street. There's an adjacent restaurant on this side here. And I'll just, with that, go to the site plan here. So what we're proposing to do is one structure building. It's going to be 2,000 square foot ion bank, which houses the front corner here with a drive-up ATM. And then there's 2 retail spaces to the rear, both 1,000 square feet. Now, biggest thing to note on here, and I'll just touch on this first, just given we had just talked about the floodway. This is the entire area in the back here that was currently paved and is being parked. And I drove out there even as recent as today, and there's a lot of construction equipment and everything else back here. So there's no stormwater quality in place, and it's all impervious coverage. So what we proposed to do with this was pull everything towards the front of the site and create this the natural vegetated buffer here. That basically what this is it doubles as compensatory storage. So there's going to be 32 cubic yards of additional storage than is out there today. And it also doubles as a water quality infiltration basin to conform to the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual. So right now, everything's sheet flowing off of that existing site directly into this wetland area in the back here. And there's a stream that runs through the back of the site. So I think ultimately what we're doing from a stormwater standpoint is a big improvement over what's out there today. Part of what we're proposing is a full access driveway. I know we went back and forth with the town here, and we've addressed a lot of the comments that came up, and we appreciate you guys. We tabled this last meeting so that we can come back with a complete application that addressed all of the outstanding comments to date. And we're happy to say that we've done that with water, planning, engineering. We're good. So we do have on here proposed LED dark sky compliant light fixtures. There's 7 lights throughout the site. There's 4 wall mounts on the front face with 2 canopy lights in the vicinity of the drive-up ATM here. Landscaping is a mix of shade trees. There's 8 total trees, 10 evergreen trees, 21 deciduous shrubs, 61 evergreen shrubs, ground cover and perennials. Another one of the benefits of a redevelopment site is that we're actually able to utilize a lot of the existing utility laterals on site. So the laterals that are servicing the existing restaurant, to an extent, we can use some of them, and then the other ones are all available, gas, electric, water, all right in North Main Street here. Let's see, I mentioned there's a reduction in impervious coverage. One of the comments that came up as well, and I think it was a town regulation, there's an existing emergency access drive to the south and to the north. We were looking to maintain both of those, so there's a little piece of asphalt here connecting the adjacent parcel, and then we're going to maintain this access that was currently out there today to the adjacent parcel on this side as well. So ultimately, a lot of improvements from a site and landscaping standpoint from what's out there. What you can't see on here is in this lawn area here in green, there's 4 or 5 mature trees that we're saving as part of the development. They had looked at potentially putting parking in this area, and we opted to just landscape that and save all these trees. So there's a really nice landscape buffer between between both of the parcels here. With regards to the stormwater management, that was what I was getting at before, where currently there are no stormwater quality measures in place. We have a conveyance system that has catch basins with deep sumps. They're hooded. It comes back into the conveyance system, I believe, is on this side of the building. So there's 3 structures, and then ultimately discharging into this water quality infiltration basin. So in times of flooding, we've been out there, and I think as recent as 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, we had a big storm event. We came out to the site for that, and water came right up to about probably back where these 3 stalls are. And then in larger storm events, this whole parking lot in the back here floods. So part of what we did and how we designed this was that whole building came up a foot above the flood elevation so that no opening in the building is below that. And then we were able to just, with that vegetated the basin in the back, I think it's 3.5, 4 feet deep. With that overflow. So it just provides that treatment before getting back into the wetlands here. So we did receive wetlands approval on a site walk on September 20th. We had the meeting a couple weeks prior to that, and then the site walk was held. So that meeting went incredibly well, and they were happy to see the vegetated basin we were putting in between where that existing pavement went to now. And then our erosion and sediment control, it's in conformance with the 2002 Connecticut Soil Erosion Guidelines. So we'll have silt fence, a temporary construction entrance, silt sacks at all the catch basins. And that's largely it. I don't know if you want to ask questions from a civil site standpoint now, or I can let Tom run through some of the architecture brief.
Why don't we hear the whole presentation, and then
Perfect.
we'll open it up.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Chiodina.
Good job, though.
Okay, good evening.
Tom, name and address, please.
I'm sorry?
Name and address.
Sorry. Tom Chiodina, DRL Architects. Want this for the record? This is first one. Okay, so we looked at the along North Main Street from Curtis to Chapman. We found primarily common New England style gable and pitched roof architecture with a sprinkling of flat roofs in some of the newer plazas and individual stores that are out there. What we did was we looked to create an eclectic combination of those traditional roof lines and combine them in what we think is a forward-looking or forward-thinking complex that reflects the bank's ideas and business model. The structure, it's a long structure, as you saw from the site plan, and it stretches beneath a gable roof that has a combination of shed roofs that accent around the rear and the side of it, and then is also accented by entrance towers at the 3 different tenant spaces to kind of break up that long gable. Are both of these on here, Jeff? Yeah. So this is from the opposite side, also from the front, but looking along the drive-up side. The materials also reflect the New England vernacular. It has a base that, it's tough to see with all the landscaping, but it has a traditional stone base veneer that wraps around the perimeter. And then the majority of the material is a long-lasting, durable, low-maintenance cement fiber clapboard with a composite trim on around all the windows and around all the roof lines. There is the towers are actually a synthetic stucco that would sort of break everything up material-wise and also add a splash of color. So you see the ion color. We would sort of encourage the tenants to sort of select a color also to help identify and give them their an entrance to their liking. The windows are aluminum anodized storefront. The main roof, the main gable roof would be an asphalt shingle with the shed roofs being accented in a standing metal seam. That's probably everything I have for you. If you have any questions or.
You all set, Tom?
Yeah.
You all set? Okay. Let's open it up to members of the commission for questions of the applicant. Peter?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I certainly appreciate the work on the landscaping. As you said, that site has been unfortunate for quite some time. And so to have something go there is good. And I particularly like a professional looking building. And so I could appreciate that. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness you have with the floodplain and just general landscaping in general, and the use of deciduous trees and the variety of trees. We're always getting folks to, a lot of times we only hear about arborvitaes and we end up having to change it. And so could you change this? Could you change that? So I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you went through. And so it looks like a very professional building. And of course, that's on a main strip, which is probably why Iron Bank picked it. And it certainly seems like it's a standout type of architecture that when you go by, it's like, oh, what is that? I guess my question's for the other two pieces of the building. What is is that going to be retail space, office space, a restaurant? Do you have, what's the general flavor for what is the intended use for those two things?
So I don't think the bank knows just yet. I think they'd be welcome to, any sort of commercial space. Could it be a cafe, something like that? Perhaps. It would have to obviously conform to the parking regulations
because
that
if
we
it's
have.
food,
Yeah.
then you kind of get other issues.
Yeah, and that would be limited too, because obviously with the bank having a drive up, we're not going to get
All of
a
that.
competing Dunkin' Donuts across the street,
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be limited to maybe a small cafe, something like that at probably most. But
So it's 1,000
The
square feet.
office space
It's
or-
1,000 for each.
I believe so, yeah.
So for each is 1,000, right? So it can't be
Right,
that
they're
big a
small.
thing. It's either small retail or a small cap, right? So, but you have no intended, no sign on the dotted line tenant yet.
Correct.
So it'd be the bank and then something in the back. But if it is not filled, it's kind of, really can't see it from the street necessarily. Because then you have a bank and nothing. And that doesn't look great either. So it's kind of a, if we build it, they will come type of thing. Or I guess that's the hope for that. So it's just a nicer thing. So just wondering like what kind of site that would attract. So how much parking do you have for each of the three?
Yeah, so the requirement's 3 per 1,000. We have 4,000 square feet, so we're required 12 spaces by code. We have 15. The bank notoriously doesn't utilize too many of those spaces, so we're in excess of 3. But again, to Tom's point, there's
Yeah.
no current retailers or commercial tenants that we've entertained at
Right.
this
And
time.
how many handicap?
2.
So a perfect scenario would be to have, like an insurance agent, real firm, something like that.
That sort of thing.
To
Right.
the bank's needs as well.
Well, that'd be actually, if it's real estate or something like that, that would actually be a perfect spot, right?
That would be their preference.
Okay. And then employee parking would be where? In the back there near the, employee parking would be where?
I'm sure that we haven't discussed where that would be, but most likely they would instruct their employees to park towards the rear.
I
as
would
the 2
guess.
doors are right here.
And you're talking about if I have other, because I'm concerned about parking in general, because I'm going to have employees, and then I have people to each spot. So I just want to be sure there's enough parking for everybody, and then people aren't forced to park in the 2 adjoining properties because there's not enough spots.
I
what I
think
mean?
one of the benefits to this, and I think why the bank suits this site so well, is because of the flood plain and the floodway, it really does limit the amount of building and parking you could fit on the site.
Yeah.
So the Financial Institute, just as a whole, notoriously doesn't utilize much parking anymore, especially during the days that we're in. A lot of it's just becoming drive-through and no one's going in.
Yeah, we hear that
So
a
I think
lot.
that this kind of serves the site pretty well in that regard. You know, if in the future something else came up and one of those spaces became a cafe or something, you know, we'd have to revisit it and come back for an amended site plan at that time. But I don't think that's the intent right now.
No, I think if it's marketed as real estate or something other financial type thing, I think that would probably be the right combination at the plaza type thing. I think you're
I
right
think
on
one
that.
of the benefits too is that, you know, even if it were constructed in phases and say these are, you know, that front building is here, and to your point, it might look a little funny because of how long and linear this building is, and then like the way the landscape is situated.
Yeah.
With this tree here, and then what's not shown are those 4 or 5 mature trees.
Right.
The site from the street, in all honesty, is going to look like it's a completed site with or without those back 2 retail spaces, which is
Okay.
kind of nice.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if they show up on the demo plan at all.
Thank you.
You
I'm
see
just
the
curious.
shadows of them, but you
All right,
can't.
thank
tell
you.
them to go.
You all set, Peter?
Yes, sir.
Teresa?
Yes, I do have some questions for you, gentlemen. Is there a dumpster location that I didn't see out on the site plan here?
That was my fault. I did not point it out. It's in the back corner right here, and it's screened by the
I always
lands.
put it by the floodplain.
Screened.
Back, you
So
know?
we've talked about that and the fact that there might be the need to kind of bolt it down or have something to kind
Right.
of hold it there. Floodwaters haven't come up that high where we're situating this, so we're hoping with the addition of the infiltration basin
Right.
that we're good. But when we get to construction documents, we're going to provide a detail to the town and part of the building permit process that shows something where that can physically be locked down.
Oh,
and
that's a good
manually
idea.
lifted.
Yeah, you don't want anything floating hazard.
Exactly right.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess town had no issues with that location at all.
No, they had the same issue you just brought up, and that prompted the conversation and me
Right.
looking into bolting down
Okay,
dumpsters.
Great, thank you. I was like, why do we think the same? No. I guess my other question then is, for the landscape design, and I understand you're an architect, but not a landscape architect, is that correct?
I'm a professional engineer. We do have professional landscape architects
Okay.
on staff.
Right, so, for the, what you called out as a water quality infiltration basin in the rear for your
Yes.
floodplain compensation. Is that just going to be seeded?
There's a conservation seed mix that we typically
Right,
include as
so
part
it's
of
just
that.
gonna be like a wetland seed
Correct.
mix?
It's going to look
So
natural.
It's an infiltration basin, so it's not gonna hold water?
There'll be
There'll be some flood contained?
so it's
flood water.
doubling in the event of a flood. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to basically hold that flood water that would have been coming up into the parking
Right,
lot in
right.
excess of what was out there now.
Okay, all right.
And then during normal everyday events, there won't be any standing water in there, and then it'll infiltrate into the ground and actually get back to the river. So we're providing that water quality measure from the infiltration, as opposed to right now, when you look at what's out there, it's basically sheet flowing at a fast rate off the impervious directly. And we had Eric Davison was the soil scientist delineated these wetlands here.
Yes,
So they're right at the edge, about 5 feet off the existing asphalt.
and very competent wetland soil scientist.
We
I've
work with him
used
a lot.
many times, yeah. I guess my other question would be is obviously this basin would need to be maintained at some point.
Correct.
In some situations. Is there a way that you guys are gonna put forth an invasive species management plan? Because what we don't want happening here is hopefully the seed mix that you plant is a hardy seed mix and it does what it needs to do, and it captures, the soil and it's be able to produce and do what it needs to do. But I think the question I have is, if you don't want anything coming in that's going to dominate and take over the preferred species that are going to be coming up here, and then that would lead to issues down further to the river and to the
So
watershed.
to your point, you guys
Yeah,
are,
so I mean, if there's a way that some sort of a maintenance plan could be in place for this basin and of course, for the landscaping, there'll be a maintenance plan,
Correct.
but specifically for the infiltration basin.
so you guys are really in tune with town staff here, because that was another comment that came up, and
I didn't know anything about that. I was just asking what I would.
it was
normally-
good. It was really good. So
Yeah.
what we do propose, it is a hardy seed mix, and in the back of the original drainage report that we submitted, we have what's called our operations and maintenance manual.
Good.
So everything on our site, the catch basins, the pavement for street sweeping, the infiltration basins, all of that has basically a plan and a guide for the contractor. The town even was smart enough to ask, a lot of times that gets lost in the back of a 300-page document that a lot of contractors won't read. So the forward thinkingness of the town here, we're basically going to put that O&M manual right onto our plan set.
Great.
So that
Construction set.
contractor prints it out in the
Right.
construction set. It's going to have the O&M documents right there. It'll have the maintenance schedule of, how often they should be maintaining everything. So it'll be all encompassing.
Okay, great, thank you, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
You all set,
I'm done,
Teresa?
yes, thank
Yeah?
you.
Nice job. Commissioner Salka?
Just one question. Number one, I love the layout of the building, the way it looks. With the two additional retail stores in the back, where would you put the signage for, the Ion Bank and whatever else would go in there? Where would that sign go so it can be seen by the public? And what's your thought on that?
I'm not sure. So the signage that's shown in the rendering for the bank is really just conceptual. They have a sign vendor that's putting together a package and is going to try and submit it within the zoning bylaws, not have to come back for any sort of variance or anything. So I think they're hoping to have some sort of street sign, whether it's a pylon sign or it's a monument sign that has the tenants on it. Beyond that, you can see how the Ion is on the corner of the entrance. So the other two would also have, ideally would have similar signage.
But more than likely, those will not, the Ion will probably be seen from
Yeah,
Main Road, but the two in the back
So you're
probably
right in
will
front of
not.
the
They'll
building,
definitely
yeah.
need some kind of signage.
agreed.
Yeah, and I think ultimately there may be opportunity, but we did show a freestanding monument sign just to the right side of the driveway, as a placeholder for now until it's designed. But right here next to the driveway, that was back far enough to not impede sight lines. But I'm assuming that all three would have a space on that sign in front here.
We just want to make sure that it's, that it's not confusing with the other retail store to the right.
Yep.
But that'll be something we look at down the road, I guess.
Signs, height, distance from the road.
Right.
Models are all in our regulations. Those are handled administratively. We don't really weigh in on those, but we have a pretty, we'll call it robust sign regulation.
If they meet regulation, you wouldn't.
He deals town side.
Yeah, you don't have to, we don't weigh in on that.
Great.
Except that
Unless,
that it was created by this body. Christina?
One thing we have not mentioned yet that I really appreciate is that you've created access to the adjacent site with this plan. And that's something that we advocate for, especially many of us, we've recently discussed this area and it's just so congested sometimes. So that's very helpful. I almost wish we could put something in on the other side over there. But anyway, I also think that this would really complement the recent updates to modern formals and some of the businesses that are on this street. I really think you're bringing it into a modern kind of conceptualization of what this area can look like, especially regarding some of the mitigation work at the brownfield site that's going on next to the fire department. I really think this could be a really good corridor with the addition of Ion Bank. And I do have to say that the other Ion Banks I've seen are really well done, and I love the rendering that you gave us. I do have some concerns about the signage. Like for those other two businesses, I would hate to have a small business go in there and kind of have them be overshadowed, but I do have faith in staff and in the wonderful signage regulations that we have that something will come to pass that would be positive for everyone. So thank you very much. You have my full support on this one.
Thank you.
They are pretty wonderful.
Right?
Caleb?
I just want to add on to the cross slot. Can you kind of zoom in on that? What I'm looking at is how, at least the one to the north, right there, yeah. So how wide is that? Is that the distance between the two lots? About how?
Yeah, so right now, basically what there was about a 12 to 14 foot cut through in the back here, and grades were really challenging. So when you go out to the back of this site, it ramped up like 3 feet to get from one to the other. So what we did was we relocated it up here. It's basically wide enough for one-way traffic. And it was, in our mind, it was an emergency access between the two. So it's really one way. If the town's desire was to have that be two-way, we could bring that back to the client to figure out, it would just be widening this out a little bit. But we basically matched what was out there today to meet the intent of the regulations. Similarly, up front, the island that we created here matched the 16-foot wide opening that was out there today. So we didn't design a new two-way drive aisle.
Okay. I
between
mean,
the two.
my hope is that it's inviting so
Yeah.
that
Oh.
people, see it as an opportunity
Yeah.
to utilize instead of having to go back onto Route 10 and
Correct.
flip around into another lot. So, however, if that looks like it's a mirror image of the south side, then I would say that that's good because that was more recently visited.
All set, Kate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from members of the commission? I have a couple. Dark sky compliant lighting, appreciate that. That's important. And I appreciate you guys going out there and doing that. For everybody in town. Access to the access drive, as Commissioner Volpe and Commissioner Coles had mentioned, is a point of importance to us up here, and I appreciate y'all providing that. Have you moved where the driveway is proposed to be? Have you moved that at all? Because there's two structures there now. There's the old restaurant, and then there's the house there.
So we have moved the driveway. So basically, the driveway was currently between. It was part on the gentleman's property to the south here, on this side. And the reason why we moved it was one. There was a couple of benefits. One, it works better for circulation internal to the site with just the counterclockwise rotation around the building. The second thing was, and it's just off the screen here, you start to kind of curve back around slightly, but when you're sitting at the existing driveway now, it could be hard to make that right-hand turn or the left-hand turn as you're looking right, because you're kind of you're closer to the curve on the wrong side of the curve. So by shifting it over, it still creates a similar condition to what you find everywhere else on this corridor, where there still is a decent amount of separation between the two driveways. It's similar across the street with the Dunkin' and then the adjacent parcel to that. One of the benefits and again, it goes back to it being a bank use with only the 15 parking spaces and generally not having the trip generation of a Dunkin' or a Starbucks. It serves this well, where those numbers are really low as far as what kind of traffic you're getting from a site like this. So I'd say those are the two reasons why we put it where we did. There's also there's a couple of large telephone poles that service the Dunkin', that service the piece across the street, that have transformers on both of them, and a lot of other equipment that falls dead center to the site. And then again, the reason for that shift was because of the sight lines.
Okay. So we'll leave that. The drive-through ATM, is there any bank services other than the ATM on the drive-through, or is it just simply a drive-through ATM? In other words, is there a window there?
No, there's no window, just an ATM, full-service ATM.
So if anyone had a bank service that they needed to be on the ATM, they would have to park and come into the
Yes,
structure.
they couldn't
Okay.
do through the ATM.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no window, no pneumatic tube.
Okay. So the other thing that I just wanted to bring up, and it obviously is a big thing, is the stormwater management. And I think that you guys have done a great job in mitigating the stormwater situation on that site. My question is, because we did probably about a month and a half ago or so have an event that resulted in some businesses over to the north side of that, further north than that, but yeah, in that area.
Yep.
That were under a substantial amount of water for an extended period of time.
Yep.
2 or 3 weeks, actually, before they receded to the point that they can get in there and do what they had to do to reopen that business. But your stormwater efforts have any adverse effect on abutting or neighboring businesses at all?
No, I would say it'd be a slight improvement. There still will be flooding on their property. We're not going to solve all of the problems, but I think ultimately what was available on site was 1,900 cubic yards below the 100-year flood elevation. and what we put back was 1930, give or take. So we put back more volume than was currently on site. So it shouldn't be any worse than it was. And we were out there during that same storm event. West Hartford was underwater by like 2-3 feet for a while, and those waters receded within a couple hours, which we were fortunate there. But right after that, we had come out to the site, and a few representatives were on site taking photos and sending them to us so we can line it up with where our proposed development was relative to the basin. So we're confident that it'll be in a better situation than it currently is today.
Yeah, and you said exactly what I wanted to hear, was that if anything, it's going to be better, which I appreciate. And, you know, out of all the parts of the town that suffered from that problem during that event, I think that this was one of the last ones that actually had the rain recede to the point that it actually became a little bit accessible. So it obviously is sort of a pinch point in terms of our stormwater
Understood.
items. Yeah, that's all I got. So anyone else? See none? You have anything else you want to add?
I think that was it from us.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion on item 9D. Yeah, staff all set on that one?
There were a couple outstanding.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Peter.
there was one question that we had on the loading space, that there's not a dedicated loading space. This is the right one, right? So that was one question, if the commission had any concerns with that. We talked today, and they are going to give sidewalk and cross easements.
Correct.
So, correct.
And that was for there's a piece of sidewalk, you can see it right where the hand is now. That it's basically town sidewalk that falls within this property, and we couldn't find any record of any current easement, so we were going to propose, an easement to the town of Southington for that piece of sidewalk that's on our property.
So we, that would be subject to the town attorney's review. And then we have not received the final sign off from water yet.
Okay.
So, I mean, you could,
Are these items that should require us to not take action on this right now, or are these things that could be addressed
we talked
administratively?
about it today, and we all thought that you could approve subject to all of those conditions.
So our motion should be subject to ironing out those issues with town staff.
Correct.
And I know from our standpoint, we had submitted back to the town a response to comment letter addressing those concerns, but we sent it to Dave and Jim, and I just didn't CC Southington Water on that. So we sent them the plan today. The notes are on the plans that were resubmitted already, but if there are minor details with regards to construction notes, we could certainly add those as we go to building permits here.
So you bring up something that I have had some thoughts on, and it may be more applicable to the next item, which is the site plan. And I guess I'll just reserve it for that. But if we stipulate in our motion that these any outstanding items be worked out to town staff satisfaction, would that satisfy that enough, Mary Ellen, for you?
Yeah, I imagine what I just stated is on the record as well. So it's clear
Yeah.
that those items are outstanding and that we would need those.
Jim, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. You good? I get a thumbs up from all three. So with that, can we get a motion with that stipulation?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve FF 270 with the stipulation that the outstanding issues will be worked out with staff based on approval.
Motion for Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
I'll make a second.
Commissioner Volpe with a second. Any further discussion? Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Quirk,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilowski,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's a yes. Motion passes. Item 9E, Dawn D. Derwin, site plan application to construct a 2,000 square foot Ion Bank with drive-up ATM and 2,000 square foot retail building with associated site improvements, property located at 376 North Main Street, owned by Sean Dingle, in a B zone, SPR 1829. This was tabled from our last meeting on October 5th. Do we have anything to add?
No.
Pretty much covered it in the last one? Okay. Is there any discussion from commissioners? I have an item. So phasing on the site plan, there are two buildings that are there now. we'll be diplomatic and call them eyesores. What is the schedule in terms of removing those eyesores from that corridor?
We haven't talked schedule yet with the developer. I'm assuming most of them, they would like to move real fast, and getting through you gentlemen and ladies will be the kind of what spins us into that discussion. The demo permits usually come a lot quicker. Once we get an approval, I know Tom and his team work through actual construction documents where they iron out some of the details with MEP. So I would say it would probably move pretty quickly, but I don't have a definitive answer at the moment.
Okay, I'm just a little bit concerned. Tommy, can you just come up, just because all this gets recorded, so if you could just, thank you.
So just to add to that, so the goal would be to be prepared to start construction in the spring so that we hit the, ideal time frame. That's not to say that we could not, if the board so wishes, try and progress with the demo to clean it up. I think that could be considered also. I think we'd have to look at those existing buildings a little bit more to see what needed to be done. But yes, if it's doable, I think the bank would agree that that's desirable.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint anyways, I think that removing those two structures is something that I would like to see happen sooner rather than later. And I understand that you're not going to start pouring concrete, in cold months, and you certainly have a weather restriction on that, not to mention all the other stuff that go into that. But in terms of demoing it, I certainly would like to see that occur ASAP. And, I've even toyed with town staff about throwing a 60 or 90-day bond request in to get that done so that we can get those buildings out of there, because as I said, they are an eyesore. And I think the building that you're constructing, is very aesthetically pleasing and attractive. And while I understand that's going to take time to put up in order to improve the corridor, as Commissioner Volpe mentioned, I think she's right. I would like to see that mess be cleaned up ASAP. So I'll appeal to your good nature and your integrity to remove those two buildings as soon as you can. And if it could be done tomorrow, and I'm a little bit flip, I certainly would like to see that happen. But I think you get the point of what I'm trying to say, right? Any other comments from members of the commission? Commissioner
I think
Santiago?
just we're probably remiss in saying to Ion Bank, welcome to Southington. So we have, we like to attract new business, and certainly Ion Bank has a nice reputation in the area. And we're glad that you chose Southington to be here. And it's a prominent spot in town. And so, we're hoping you'll be, as you are in other communities, a good neighbor and participate in community events and things like this. So I think we'd be remiss in not saying that. So if you could pass that along.
I would definitely pass that along.
Yeah, we appreciate your business for sure. Any other comments from members of the commission?
I'm sorry.
Teresa?
I do have one, yeah.
Yep.
And to counter, not to counter, but to include or to complement what the chair said regarding the blight and removing those buildings. Was there a requirement for a phase 1 environmental assessment done on this property?
They did.
And for demoing those buildings, are there any hazardous issues like asbestos? I don't know how old the structures are. I'm just curious. I guess that's all been done.
I don't know,
through
but
contract or anything?
That's what would, yeah.
So-
We would definitely do our due diligence. And
Right. So the due diligence needs to be done. Okay. And is there any concerns from the town, from staff regarding the demo?
That would be a requirement of the building department.
The building department. Okay.
Based on
Okay. Great. Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you. I was just curious about that since the chairman brought up the blight situation. I forgot about the two demos.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Volpe?
I can tell you, Teresa, they are not historically significant.
Well, I'm sure they're
No, I mean that from a National Register, State Register, and the 2017 Architectural Survey, which we all know I've studied at this point.
Yeah. I'm
They
looking
are
at-
not historically
Right,
significant.
Right.
But the pizza that was made there was.
But the pizza was.
That was my spot.
I don't know, the little man up there, someone ripped that off.
Yeah.
Dear.
Little, I don't know.
Souvenirs, you know.
No,
everybody- I
guess-
think this is a
I don't
great
know.
addition. I think it's gonna.
Exactly.
It's the future of our town.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more comments, Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
We didn't have a motion yet.
Oh, we don't have a motion, I'm sorry.
We have the same staff requirements on the stipulation.
Mary Ellen, are you all set on these, or do you want a stipulation on this as well?
I think I would just put the same stipulations on there,
Yeah, same thing,
carry it over.
same stipulation.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve SPR 1829 with the stipulations that we get the approval, all the approvals from planning are taken care of.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Volpe. Any other discussion? Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Quark,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilowski,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Chair Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammerson.
Hammersley's a yes. Congratulations, and as I said, welcome to our town, and we look forward to having you here for a long time.
Thank you very much.
Item 9F, Richard Munson and Savik Achnowowski, 10-lot subdivision application, property located at 136 Curtis Street, owned by Virginia Kayer et al. In an I2 zone S1330.
Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, just to be on the safe side, I think I'm just gonna recuse myself from this one. I've done previous work, not for these owners, but for the properties,
Okay.
so
Okay,
I'll just sit this one
so
out.
that's noted. Teresa Albanese will sit in your place. Thanks, Jeff.
Go sit in the crowd.
Probably a good call.
Probably. Better be safe than sorry.
Notice how he always opts out the long ones. You know?
He's no dummy.
I know.
Got it.
Go for it,
There
Sev.
you go.
Let's see if we can blow it up a little bit. Oops.
See that little arrow on the left there, Seb? That tiny one? If you just go down and to the left, you can collapse that. Nope, to the left. That one.
There you
Oh.
go.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Nice.
That's what happens all the time. There you go. Okay, that will fit. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Seth Bovino, planner with Kratz and Jones. For orientation purpose, this is Curtis Street. North is in this direction here. We have the rail to trail on the east side of the property. The property is 20.5 acres, plus or minus. It's surrounded by a residential neighborhood to the west and to the south, together with Curtis Street. And on the north side, we have industrial properties. This is the old solvents recovery. And then on the east side of the rail to trail, it's industrial property. The property is served by water and sewer. All utilities are available to the site. The grading of the land, the existing grades, the water drains west to east toward the rail to trail. And then eventually the water goes into a wetland area, a small wetland area, which is along the rail to trail in the southeast corner of the property at this location. We maintaining the drainage, as far as drainage is concerned, we maintain the same drainage pattern. Obviously, we're going to install catch basins, pipes, and a drainage system that handles that. And we achieve desire by constructing a detention area in the southeast corner, and it'll be also used as a water quality basin, and then eventually discharges overland into wetland area right in this corner. And we're not impacting, we're not filling wetlands. We're just doing a little bit of disturbance in the upland review area at this corner here. The proposal before you is for a 10-lot industrial subdivision. It's zone I2. The lot sizes will vary from 3/4 of an acre for these lots here to 3.2 acres for this lot at this location. We're going to preserve a strip of land along the rail to trail that goes from about 40 feet in width to about over 100 feet in width in this area here. That'll be dedicated to the town together with the right-of-way for the roadway system there. We received staff comments. We responded to all the comments. At this point, we're in front of the Wetlands Commissions. They have to take action. There's a couple issues with the subdivision. One is the sidewalk waiver request that we have in front of you, and the other is the road length. There is a mention in the regulation 1,000 feet for a cul-de-sac generally. My point on that is that generally gives us a little bit of leeway in terms of the length of the cul-de-sac. If we are to bring back this cul-de-sac to the 1,000-foot mark, this project will not be possible because we will lose these 3 lots here. And we're trying to meet the regulations by having one rear lot, which is this one, and the others are all front lots that meet the regulations. Believe me, we don't want to construct additional road because 400 feet of road at today's prices are probably $200,000. So it's what we can do with this land. It is the unusual shape of the land, which is long and narrow. So we have to have this length to be able to achieve the number of lots that we have. If you have any questions at this point, we'd like to answer.
Thanks, Ed. Before we get into questions, I'm going to recuse Commissioner Wolowski. He has a conflict on this, so I think just to be safe for his standpoint that we'll do that. We don't have anyone to replace him with, but we still have a quorum, so that's fine. Could I just mention a couple things because I've been involved in trying to resolve some issues that they've had at this site, and folks up here might remember that 2 years ago, I think it was one of the first applications that people who just got elected to planning and zoning saw was on this site where there was a request to convert this from an I2 zone to an R2025 zone, which we ended up denying ultimately because we didn't want to lose the industrial space. I think you guys have done a fantastic job of addressing a lot of the concerns. It won't be a surprise to you. I'm not in favor of the sidewalk waiver. At least on Curtis Street, I mean, it's a small section of sidewalk that we're talking about. I get on the interior of the development. I don't have a problem with foregoing that, but I think that providing that sidewalk especially because it is close to the Rails to Trails facility and it would service all the people who are just on the other side of this development, the neighbors up there. I think it's important, but that's a matter for everybody to take up at some point as we move forward. Where I'm going to go with this is that I think there's still concerns from residents that are in the area, and I think that those concerns could best, Peter, I think, mentioned it earlier. We always encourage neighbors to get together and to talk about their differences so that we don't become the remediators or mediators of those differences and try to resolve it up here. It's always best if 2 neighbors, so to speak, can get together and talk about it and come together with some consensus and provide that for us. My understanding is that was something that our economic development director was trying to work out. It never ended up getting scheduled because of people's schedules. Our next meeting is in 4 weeks, I think, because we have an election coming up and we don't have one on the 2nd of November. But I would encourage the developer, Mr. Munson, and you, Sev, to get together with the neighbors. You probably know who they are. If you don't, staff can probably tell you who they are, and there's letters that were sent to all of us that outline who they are, and just have a sit down and just a conversation to see some of the things that they're concerned about. One of the things that we heard a lot of when this application came up to us a couple of years ago was that the current tenant on that piece of property is not very neighborly. And there are a lot of things that have gone on that we would like to make sure are remediated or eliminated, actually, to be more blunt about it. And I think that you're real close. Real close. I think that with a little bit of massaging around the margins, I think you're there where both parties can walk away and say this is a great move and move forward, and people will be happy. So I would encourage you to do that. I don't think you're looking for water approval right now. You mentioned
The wetlands.
wetlands approval, so I don't think we can act on it anyways.
No, you can't.
And even if we could, I would have requested that we table this just to give you an opportunity to sit down and talk to each other. And I think that they have some reasonable requests, and I think that I understand what you all are trying to do, and I'm supportive of that, and I would really like to see this move forward as it looks right now, with a little bit of minor revisions, if you will. So I would encourage you to do that, but with that, I'll open it up to commissioners for questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer your question.
Sure, sir, go ahead.
We are proposing, we know the history of the site. I represented Mr. Lovely on this before for that proposal. We're proposing a 30-foot buffer all along the residential area here and across the way next to the house. And this buffer here particularly is going to be, because the grades are similar to the homes next door, there's going to be like a 4-foot berm, and then it'll be landscaped on top to provide that visual separation. And then as you go north, the grades, we're going to be cutting the grades, so this operation will be below grade, but we're still going to have the landscaping, preserving the current vegetation and adding to the vegetation. I'll be glad to talk to Mr. Munson and his partner, and have them discuss what the issues are with the neighbors. But I believe that the landscaping, preventing any problems with the neighbor, that's number one.
Yeah, like I said, Seb, I think that you all did a great job on this, addressing a lot of those concerns. And maybe it's because you had the familiarity from the last experience on the property, and I think you're very close. I'm just trying to encourage you to bring it over the finish line and address some of those things. I like the setup of how you have the building set up with their backs to the residents up there, so that there's not a lot of activity back there. I like the lighting plan that you all have. I like the berm. I think maybe there might be a little bit more that they're looking for, and maybe you can have a conversation with them, and maybe they just don't understand what that's going to look like. But but I'm just trying to encourage you all to talk to each other, and if you need someone on staff or myself to facilitate that, I'm happy to do it, in the interest of getting this property improved significantly, which you guys are proposing to do, which I appreciate.
Yeah, and just so you know, and the public knows, that the current building is going to be removed, and the roadway is going to be placed pretty much where that building is, so it's away from the neighbor. So that's what we're doing there.
Yeah, a very good, considerate, thoughtful job, and I think there's just a little bit more that maybe we need to just look at and have a conversation about before you're 100% there.
Very good.
We don't open it up to public comment right now. No, I appreciate that. But is there any other question, Commissioner Santiago?
Yeah. So Seb, I think as Mr. Chair said, I think our concerns would probably echo the residents, which is the concerns that they had before: noise, sight lines, trucks, hours of operation, exhaust, all those things that adversely affect that you heard before. So I think those are the list of things that we would ask, and they would ask, lighting, certainly get hours of operation, because this is light industrial, right?
Yes. Well, it's I2, it's a heavy industry.
It's heavy.
But the way this is designed,
This
we're
is an
really
important
catering to the smaller user, not the large users.
So it's not a big,
You're not looking at a trucking operation here.
right. So I think noise within the building, that kind of thing, like what type of operation, what does that mean? What type of truck would come in and out? Because depending upon what you have, do you have a big one, small one, that kind of thing, loading, unloading, that kind of stuff.
Along those lines, so the commission knows that we are looking for approval for the subdivision. Each one of these lots, when they're ready to be built, they have to come back to show you what they're doing in terms of size of building, the type of business, the parking, the hours of operation.
Okay.
So we have 10 buildings here, and each one of them has to come back.
Okay, so
So that's what we are
thank
looking
you for that.
This is site
That really is an important.
So thank you for that. So you're asking for,
Splitting the land,
can we split the land into 10 units?
that's it.
So can we split the land into 10 units? And you'll have your conversation with the neighbors about structure, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Then, as those sites are sold, each individual owner needs to come here and say, here's what we're doing
Yes.
to that particular site. Is that fair?
That's 100% correct. So this building, it's to show you what could be there, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that building. It could be bigger, a little bit smaller, number of parking may change, and at that time, you'll know the use and can judge the use and the time of operation at that time. Right now, it's going to be based on the current regulation. If the operations allowed in this zone is, let's say, 8 to 6 at night,
Whatever it
that's
is,
what's
yeah.
got to be.
Right, right.
But if somebody comes along is proposing something, you're going to know about it.
Got it. Okay.
Not only know, but you have to.
I have to approve. We have to approve it. In no public, would that be public hearing or no public hearing?
No,
like
it's
this?
site plan, straight.
The site plan. So
Yes.
we would have a site plan review of each of the 10 once you sell it and they want to go cut, once they want to dig.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. That helps a lot, I think.
So Seb, am I correct? I thought I heard earlier from somebody that this site plan has the effect of taking it from an I2 zone to effectively making it an I1 zone, which is a little bit more restrictive than what an I2 zone.
We'll have like a combination
Yeah.
of that, the two zones. Yes.
Right, because of the size of the lots,
So because of the size of the lot.
right?
And we are restricting the storage area.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Any other?
Yeah, he did say. You want to say something? This is Richard Munson.
Hi, Rich Munson, applicant, 990 Andrew Street in Southington. So I just want to have it on the record that the lots in the rear are all over 2 acres, which meet the current I2 regulations. So we want to maintain those with the current I2 guidelines.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
And I think those are less of a, for myself anyways, less of a concern than the ones that are up front that are abutting the neighbors that
Yes.
we all heard from
right.
over the last couple of years. So,
But I also, Seb and I have also talked in detail about this, that the, this is a conceptual plan.
Yep.
And that the lots may be revised. There might be, different configurations of lots, different sizes of lots.
depending on the tenant and their needs.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, lots could be combined, but
Right.
we have the ability to go down with the text change modification that we have down to 20,000 square feet. But, we could combine them to have 2 acre lots as well.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Thanks.
Along those lines, an example of that is this. This building here is proposed to straddle 2 lots. These are 2 lots, and we made an example of it by putting it in the middle of the property and having a circulation around it. So that's the kind of thing you're going to be maybe seeing, depending on the buyer.
Okay. Caleb?
So I guess my question is this then: if we go to the subdivision and bear with me as I kind of muddle my way through this as I usually do, but we have one tenant there now who it has been challenging with the neighbors. If we go to a subdivide and if the lots are not improved, then essentially we could have 10 unimproved lots with the same type of use. Is that right? So right now we have pretty much outdoor storage, I2 use, which the neighbors are finding that's pretty challenging for them. If we improve the properties and put buildings on, which I think would be pretty great, that would solve the problem. But until that happens, the individual unimproved lots can be maintained and used in the similar fashion that they are right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the existing condition that you're dealing with. Then Mr. Munson will have to purchase the property and then start the improvements, put the road in, and then eventually get each lot sold and built upon. But in the meantime, from your approval time to the moment the closing takes place and to the moment the road is completed and accepted, the property will be as it is. But the tenant will be gone. Once he purchases the property,
So
then
yeah,
he's going to start
let me
working
be
on
clear
it.
on that. So is the relationship between Mr. Munson and the current tenant a limited one, I guess we could say?
We have no relationship. We haven't spoken to the current tenant or tenants. And our intent is to get in and construct the road right away and market the lots and move forward with moving those tenants out. There might be some cases where they might ask to stay, but I think that would probably be a hindrance to the development of the property.
I appreciate your answer, sir. Thank you.
You all set?
Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments from members of the commission?
Just
Bob?
Seb, with that, you're going to sell the individual lots. You'll have separate buildings on them. But the bottom line is it doesn't change the, what you talked about would be the berm in the back, et cetera. That doesn't change. That will be there regardless of what happens on the property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's the main thing, is trying to protect the neighbors.
And actually brings it at least up to code or meets our regulations, which is which is not the situation right now and hasn't been for some time.
Right.
So, well, you'll be back.
Yes.
So I'm sure it will give us time to think of any additional thoughts and share those with you when you come back in a month. But like I said, I think you all have done a great job, and I appreciate the work that you put into it. I just would ask that you take that one final step and
We will.
and communicate with them. And like I said, if you need that to be facilitated, either town staff could do it or I'm happy to do it as well. So, all
You
right,
need a motion to table, or is it not ready for action?
this one is not ready for action, right? So I think we could just table it. Yeah. So, do you have anything else before?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Munson.
you.
I appreciate the work that you're all doing
No
out there.
problem.
Item 9G,
We
request.
have to have a motion to table.
Oh, sure. Let's get a motion to table.
Just make a motion that we table S1302. I'm sorry, 1330.
Okay. Motion from Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Coles. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9G, request for release of a $34,000, thank you, Jim, $34,200 E&S bond, Northridge Estates S1302. Mr. Capone, and while he's going to his seat, we will reseat Mr. Gwork and reseat Mr. Wolowski. Teresa, thank you.
No problem.
For action for release of the E&S bond for Northridge Estates.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we release the bond on S1302.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Coles with a second. Any discussion? I think I'd do a voice vote on this. Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9H, request for release of a $5,500 ENS bond, signed pro 161 Canal Street, SPR 1805. Jim?
Chairman, this particular development has a stable site and could be released for the ENS bond.
Okay, so it's ready for action. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, make a motion, we release the bond on SPR 1805.
Commissioner Sulka with a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sintayo with a second. Everybody's getting in. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10, administrative items. Mary Ellen, anything?
None.
Nothing. Item 11, items to schedule for public hearing. We have nothing.
Keep going.
Item 12, receipts of new applications. We have nothing.
Something's wrong.
Well, nothing's wrong. This is what happens. So we do have an election that comes up in 2 weeks. So, you know, I have all faith in the world that there will be a bevy of action that occurs in this group over the next 2 years. Whether I'm here for it or not is yet to be determined by the electorate, as well as a couple of us other ones that are sitting up here. So if this happens to be my last meeting, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate all the hard work you all have done. Commissioner Gwark, this is his last meeting.
That's what I was gonna ask, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
We got sworn in before the first meeting last time, whenever we got sworn in, right? So this is my last.
this is your last meeting, Jeff. So Jeff, you've done a great job. It's been a pleasure having you, and
Fine. Good luck to everybody that's running as
yeah,
well.
I appreciate your insight and your input and your perspective on things.
Get to bed before 10 now.
Well, tonight you get to bed before 10 too, so.
You're a Sox fan.
I'm a Braves fan, so I recorded the
There you
game.
go.
I gotta
Oh.
see how it ended.
Likewise with Commissioner Albanese, this is her last meeting as well. So Teresa, thank you very much
It's
for
been a
all
pleasure
your work.
serving with everyone. Thank you.
We appreciate your time. I'm sure that we'll find other avenues for you all to participate
You
and
got it.
contribute back to the community, likewise that you've done over the last couple of years. Commissioner Walowski, Commissioner Coles, you want to say anything?
Best of luck to y'all.
Best of luck.
Best of luck.
Caleb's here regardless because Caleb's term doesn't run out until 2000.
Forever.
Be careful. But with that, Steve, you all set?
I'm
Okay.
fine.
Um,
On the other side.
yeah. With that, we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Volpe with a motion.
Second.
Do we have a second?
One
Commissioner
second.
Ward
I got
with
it
a
in,
second.
yes.
Get on the
Any
board.
discussion?
No.
Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Whoa,
Wow.
turn my hearing aids down.
Very passionate.
Hey.